chat.
I know, I love this.
Okay, so hi everyone. So we are doing something a little different tonight. One of the really fun things about Spark and Gesher joining is that I get to have so many chats with Shifra, and that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be having a chat about Rosh Hashana.
Can I just interject real quick? Maybe we can ask just one person to text you if they can hear you.
Sure. Could someone chat to make sure? I want to make sure that people could hear us. So, okay. I guess someone would post in the chat if they couldn't hear. All right, let me just see. Okay, I don't see anything about anyone not hearing, so let's assume that people could hear us.
Okay, because it's a webinar, we can just see ourselves, but we can't see your faces, whether you can hear us or not.
Okay, so if anyone can't hear us, just send us a text. We were having some tech issues. I'm sorry that we started a few minutes late, but I think we're good to go now. Okay, so the reason why we decided to do this session is because Rosh Hashana is obviously a really important holiday and a very important day or 2 days in the Jewish calendar. And this year it's going to look very different, for everyone in some way, I'm sure. And, I know for myself, I felt like, this year I'm not going to shul because, number one, I have a baby, but also because they're spacing people 6 feet apart. I didn't want to take up a spot if I'm going to be there for so short. So we were just talking about how it's going to look very different this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be any less meaningful and beautiful. And we felt like it was important to have some sessions on bringing Rosh Hashana home. How do you make Rosh Hashana in your home just as meaningful, which I think is really doable. So we have 3 sessions in this series. The first session, we're going to focus on the spiritual meaning and significance behind the holiday. The second session, we're going to talk about what are some practical things you could do in your home. We're going to talk about the different kind of foods that you can serve. We're going to talk about tashla and different tips to kind of really bring Rosh Hashana to your house. And the third session is going to be very experiential. We're going to do a challah bake. And we're all gonna get together and make our challah together. That will be a regular Zoom session where we'll all see each other baking our challahs, which I'm super excited about. So, Shifra, how are you feeling about Rosh Hashana coming up?
Sarah, I've lost you again.
Oh no, you hear me? Oh, 1 second. Okay, am I good, Shifra?
Got you.
So Shifra, how are you feeling about Rosh Hashana coming up?
Honestly, it's been so difficult for me to get in the mode of the high holidays this year because there's so many other distractions that we have going on, right? We have our kids going back to school, either virtually or in person, and all these new parameters that we have to try and make like it's normal when it's completely abnormal. And it's hard. It's hard to say that, wow, these high holidays are coming and there's so many other things going on. So I actually am very grateful that we had this class coming up so that we kind of forced us to say, okay, Rosh Hashanah is here. What are we going to do about it? And I'm excited to share with all of you and to hear what Sarah has to say also. I also was thinking that if we really like step back for a minute and realize that last year on Rosh Hashana, all the things that happened in 2020, like this crazy situation that's happened to us. So the time that all that was decided was last Rosh Hashana. And it kind of gives us this visual of really the power of that day, where we don't take it for granted anymore because we realize like, wow, this is a really important, very monumental moment that we really have to think, okay, how are we going to approach our Creator on this day? Whereas, you know, when life is just somewhat normal, it's easier for us not to think about what the day really means. But this year for me, it's like, whoa, like I really have to sit and think about what I want my next year to look like and what I should be praying for my next year.
Wow. That's actually a really like crazy thought to think about, that last Rosh Hashana, it was decided that that this was going to happen, that this year. I mean, no one could have ever imagined what would happen this year. It's really pretty crazy. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely, I think, very significant to think about like what's coming up and how our prayers, our work that we do this year really affects this upcoming year, which will, God willing.
Sarah, I'm so sorry to make you do this again.
No problem. Okay, so.
This is crazy. I just want to be able to talk normally to you when we have this like tech issue, but I hope nobody else can really sense it too much.
Okay, well, God willing, next Rosh Hashana, we should be able to have this in person.
Amen.
Okay, so, you know, I was just saying that how it's really crazy and almost frightening to think about how all this was decided last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask each other questions, and we're going to answer questions. We each chose topics that we thought were very significant to talk about tonight. So, Shifra, you want to start off?
Yes. Okay, so we have this holiday, Rosh Hashana. Why is it happening now? What's significant about this time of year, where in the past, you know, like when we see Passover, right? It happens because at that time of year, God had the Exodus and let us come out of Egypt, right? Or Shavuot was the time of year that we received the Torah. Purim, we won the war against the Persians. But what happens at this time of year that we have Rosh Hashanah right now?
Okay, that's a great question. And I actually think that it's a really good thing to talk about with your family. Like, why is Rosh Hashanah in the fall? Why not in the spring? Why not in the winter? Right? We know every holiday, the timing of it has a deep spiritual significance. And I think that in Judaism we really encourage questions. So this is a great conversation to have around your table. So what happened on Rosh Hashanah, year one? Now, if you were to ask me, like, on a logical perspective, the way we should have it is year one should be, you know, day one, Rosh Hashanah should be the first day that the world was created, right? That we, every year, kind of remember the first day of creation by celebrating the new year. But actually, Rosh Hashanah is on day 6. And Shifra, do you know what happened? Who was created on day 6? Let's test your knowledge.
So man was created on day 6.
Okay, very good. So man was created on day 6. So why are we celebrating on the day that man was created? So let me ask you some Hebrew questions, Shifra. How do you say man in Hebrew?
Okay, she's testing me here. That's scary. Sorry, you can't do that to me. It's a good thing I know this answer, but don't give me any more quizzes. Adam.
Okay. Adam. Okay. Now, what other word sounds like Adam in Hebrew? Do you think of another word?
Okay, so the word for ground in Hebrew is Adama.
Okay, very good. So the word Adam, right, first man ever to exist, comes from the word Adama, which means ground, which is kind of weird if you think about it, right? Adam was called Adam because he came from the ground, right? We know that God formed Adam from the dust of the earth. It's kind of like me saying, you know, I'm going to name my kid Hospital because my kid came from the hospital, you know? Right? It's just, or I'm going to name my kid Uterus because my kid came from my uterus, right? I mean, like,
oh my gosh.
That would be have some awkward moments, right? But why was Adam called Adam, right? And the idea is that if you think about it, what comes from the earth, right? Everything, right? Plants, trees, flowers. But if you think about what earth is on its own, it's just like brown dust, right? Earth becomes significant when we do something meaningful with it. When we take a seed and plant it and make something beautiful. But on its own, I mean, it's earth, it's just dust, it's mud, it's not anything so exciting, right? What God was telling Adam when he called him Adam and created him from the earth was that man is a vessel, right? And God breathed into us and made us a person, and we can, with a soul, and with that comes potential, right? We could make ourselves into anything, but we could also not do anything with our lives. It's really our choice, right? How amazing a person is really dependent on how much work they put into themselves, right? So if you think about it, the reason why Rosh Hashana happens on the day man was created, because on the day that we were created, it's appropriate to ask ourselves, are we living up to our potential? Is Adam, is man living up to their potential? Are we doing what we were put in this earth to do?
That's so profound.
I heard once like kind of like a parable about this, right? Let's say you were building a telescope, you know, like they have these huge telescopes that could see like way, you know, light years away. So you're building a telescope, and in order to build a telescope, you have to build a very impressive building around it, you know, that's like could, you know, withstand storms and earthquakes, right? Because if you're spending $1 million on a telescope, you're going to want to make it like the most impressive building ever. So you build this like incredible building, and you put inside the building a telescope, right? On what day are you going to celebrate? On the day the building is completed, or on the day the telescope was put inside? Here's another question, Shifra. You thought you were just going to like get off easy tonight.
Oh my goodness. The day, so say that again. The day that
the day the building was completed, or the day that they then put in the telescope? Right, first they finished the building, then they put in the telescope. Which day are you going to celebrate? Which day are you going to invite all the dignitaries?
I guess the day when they could start doing something.
Okay, right? You're going to celebrate the day you put in the telescope, right? Because the whole point of the building is for the telescope. Just to celebrate the building is kind of silly, right? The reason why we don't celebrate Rosh Hashana on the day that the world was created, because the world was created for us, right? For us to accomplish great things in it, right? We celebrate Rosh Hashana on the day man was created, because man is the purpose for creation. That's really what it all comes down to. And that's why really the whole idea, if I were to choose one word to describe Rosh Hashana, it might be hard, but it might be introspection. So it's really about evaluating, how am I doing? How is mankind doing? How are we doing individually, collectively, in our job and our role as the people of this earth, as the Jewish people specifically? So, and I think this is like a really great conversation that we could have with our children. How are we doing as a family? How are we doing as a community? How are we doing as a country?
Oh boy.
Not going to discuss that on here, right?
No, absolutely not. But I love that you're saying that, because we're trying to teach our children and our family to become intentional about life. Essentially,
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Not just going through the motions of survival, but actually, why are we here? What's the purpose of this whole building, like you said? So I love it.
Thank you. Okay, so now my turn to ask you a question, and hopefully you don't quiz me as much.
I'm going to try not to, but I may pay you back a little bit. But sorry, I just want to ask you, when I talk, would you mind muting me? Because I have to hear you through the phone. It's hard to hear myself twice.
Okay.
Yes.
Better? Okay.
But I don't hear your question right now.
Okay, so I got it. Okay, so my question for you is, okay, so I said that this is a day of introspection. Now that sounds pretty heavy. Introspection, you know, if you think about like going in front of the boss to get, you know, your performance review, that's a pretty intense situation. But if you think about Rosh Hashana, it's a pretty celebratory day, right? We eat meals, we celebrate with friends, we wish each other Shana Tova. Like, why are we celebrating? It seems like it should be more serious, like intense, like Yom Kippur. Why is it this like festive sort of day?
Okay, so that's an amazing question. And I just got hung up from you, so I can't hear you, Sarah.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna take 1 minute so that my phone doesn't die. Less than a minute, I'm just gonna plug it in.
Okay, so while Shifra is coming back, I wanna just apologize. For some reason, I can hear Shifra, but she can't hear me. So the way we're doing this is Shifra has me on her earpod. So that way we could continue this. So I apologize for the, that we're having some tech issues, but God willing, we will get through this.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear you. Did you put me on mute?
Nope.
Okay, hold on. Okay. I hear you.
You hear me?
Yes,
Okay, great.
I'm so sorry, everybody, about these technical difficulties. Please forgive us. But hopefully now my phone is plugged in. Sarah and I have the system so we can hear each other and speak to you at the same time. So this question always bothered me. If you think about it, Rosh Hashana, like we mentioned before, is the day that God decides, are we going to live? Are we going to die? What's going to happen to us? Are we going to be blessed with wealth? Are we going to have financial struggles? Are our children going to thrive? Are we going to have good relationships this year? All the things that happen to us is what's decided on Rosh Hashana, like a court case. It's literally like a court case. So if you think about it, a person is about to stand before the judge, right? Like the defendant. He's had months of preparing for his, he's going to get up and he's going to stand before the jury and his lawyer, and they've prepped everything out. The day of judgment, when it's going to be decided whether he's going to be convicted or not, or what's going to happen to him, this person, he's not going to be just like having a beautiful, lavish meal and dressed in all his fine clothing like it's a day of celebration. If anything, we're going to be fasting, right? Like we can't eat when we're nervous, when we're about to go on show for anything, we can hardly eat. I know I can't, like before I'm about to take a big exam or anything monumental, I can't eat. And here we're commanded not only that we have to eat delicious food, meat, wine, festive food and celebrations, but it says we have a mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah to be happy. It's almost like an impossible commandment. How can we be happy? What is going on here? So there's one pivotal piece of information that we have to keep in mind in order for it to make sense for us. And Sarah, I'm not going to quiz you here, but what would change the situation? Like, there's the defendant standing in front of the jury and standing in front of hundreds of people coming to watch the case. Whether this man is going to be convicted of, let's say, 25 years imprisonment, what would make this defendant so confident that he was going to win?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, perhaps if he had like a special relationship with the judge, or he had bribed the judge or something.
Bingo. Okay, so that doesn't sound very good. That doesn't sound very straight and narrow. But in reality, that's what's going on here on Rosh Hashana. Because God, we actually have a prayer on Rosh Hashana, a whole prayer of supplications for God that start with Avinu Malkeinu, my Father, and then we say my King. Because yes, God is the King of the world, the King of Kings. But what is he first? He's our Father. He loves us so much, more than of ourselves, that he's the one that's rooting for us. So yes, we're in judgment on this day, but the one who's judging us is our dad. is our dad that wants nothing more than for us to succeed. And we know this because a lot of us are parents, and we know just how much we want our children to succeed. We know just how much that when they're successful, we feel more pride than we feel at our own successes. And that's who's judging us. So what God is telling us in Rosh Hashanah is, yes, you're being judged today. Yes, I'm going to decide what's going to happen to you this year. But I'm also your dad. And I also love you more than you can ever possibly love yourself. And I'm rooting for you. And our sages say that with our belief in that concept, when we show God that we're celebrating on Rosh Hashanah, by that belief alone, we merit to be written in the book of life. God says, I want you to be happy. I want you to trust me and know that I'm your dad. And when you do that, you're going to become worthy of an amazing year. So that's this duality on Rosh Hashanah. Yes, it is a serious day. Yes, we are begging for our life, so to speak. But who are we begging it from? From the God who's our Father that loves us more than we love ourselves. And sorry, you're going to say something here?
No.
No. I just want to just put it in the context of a parent. You know, sometimes you would think like, oh, if God loved me, he would just give me whatever I asked for. Like I would pray and boom, he would just give me what I wanted. He would help me win the lottery, and he would help me, you know, get whatever it is that I wanted to get. That's what true love is. Like if he just loved me with this incredible amount of love, why won't he just answer my prayers and give me anything I wanted? So again, let's go back to the analogy between a parent and a child. When we see that our children want something so badly, and I don't know what the latest gadgets are, but I'm sure you guys do. And like the latest Wii or Nintendo or PS3, 4, 5, I don't even know what is in right now. Thank God. But when our kids ask for these things, we can have two approaches. We can say, sure, honey, I'll give it to you. Or, and this is where a parent who we believe is a loving, really loving, caring parent will say, you want this so badly? Sure. But let's put a system in place. Let's put a reward system where you can work to earn it. Because as parents, we know that when a child works towards something, that not just a child, anybody, when we work towards something, that feeling of ownership is so rewarding that they'll appreciate that gift so much more when it becomes theirs, when they've acquired it. And when it's just a freebie, like, there's all these studies done with, these lottery winners. Sarah, do you know what I'm referring to when lottery winners earn the ticket? So what happens usually?
They lose it all and get depressed.
Pretty much. That's what happens. Like when somebody wins a free ticket to wealth, so very often, maybe not all the time, but very often you'll hear that it will be squandered very easily. And the reasoning behind that is because it wasn't acquired, it wasn't earned. It didn't happen through sweat, blood, and tears. And because of that, the appreciation of the gift wasn't enough for them to hold on to it and fully appreciate it. So God is telling us, I want to give you all the blessings of the world. I want to give you life. I want to give you reward for all the wonderful things that you have done. I just love you so much. But I know that the greatest way of giving and the biggest form of love is if I set a system in place and have you earn it. And when we do that and we follow the mitzvot, that's when we really feel we've acquired God's blessing. That's the ultimate happiness. So that's also another reason for celebration in the way that God actually shows us, I love you. I love you so much. I'm giving you in that absolute most ultimate way that yes, I'm judging you, but I'm also your father and I'm your father first. And that's what happens at Rosh Hashana.
I love that. So the school year just started, and one of my kids, actually our kids both have the same teacher because we have two kids in the same classes. And one of my kids' teachers I've noticed has a little bit of like a tough love approach where she really expects a lot from the students. And I was talking to her and I'm like, I love it that you have high expectations because I know this is going to make my child grow, that you're not just going to be complacent with him just, you know, kind of taking it easy, but you really are pushing each kid to their best. And like as a parent, that's so important to me. So I love that idea because I think as parents, we don't want, we want our kids to work through stuff and to grow and to become the best they can.
You know, in fact, Sarah, I remember that recently you gave like one of those talks that you give. I love your inspiring, 3-minute videos sometimes that you share. And one of your recent ones was about how you let your daughter stay in camp, even though it was something that was so hard for you because initially she was very homesick. And you wanted to have that immediate instinct of saving her, swooping in and taking her out and kissing her boo-boo and making it all go away. But you explained in the video that as a parent, you knew that the way for her to grow was for her to go through that experience. Even though she was really struggling in that moment, you let her go through that experience. And because of that, she came back and she felt so great. Like you were telling me, just like how she just wants to keep up with all her camp friends. And now she's just on cloud 9. But if you wouldn't have allowed her to go through that challenge and that struggle, then it might not have been as rewarding. So that ties in as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's move on. We are trying to show our children and ourselves that we want to earn this good year, right? We want it to be the best year, but we know that by it being so incredible, there's work that's involved. There's becoming our best selves. There's this process, right? As Sarah said in the beginning, Adam is all about growth and potential and what he's going to do with this gift of life that God's given him. So we have this whole month before Rosh Hashana where we get to delve into our past year and we get to see what are the things that we're proud of. What are the things we want to keep in our next year? And we also get the chance to say, okay, what are the things that I needed a little bit of help with? What are the things that I messed up slightly? And this month allows us to have this introspection, this, in Hebrew they call it a cheshbon hanefesh, a calculation of our soul, where we go through our actions of the year and see, okay, what could we have done differently? And in January, a lot of people have it as New Year's resolutions. What do we want to do? And there's certain things that every Rosh Hashana I write down, I tell myself, I want to be better in this. I want to be better in this. For example, I'm a night person and it's very easy for me to stay up very late at night. It's when I unwind, that's when I listen to inspiring shows or talks, maybe not such inspiring shows, maybe just regular shows. And I like just chilling at night. But I know that when I go to sleep late, it messes up my whole next day. And I work on this, I've been working on this for years. And I'm very good for a short period of time. And then I find that sometimes I kind of slip out of it. And I'm always back to square one where I'm still struggling with the same problem. So what I'm going to ask Sarah now is, we're supposed to make New Year's resolutions. We're supposed to really work on ourselves to make commitments that we can actually keep so that next year, we don't have to go back to that same commitment. I'm going to ask Sarah how. Can you give us some practical tips and tools how to do this?
Sure. So, first of all, I always get like a little bit, I don't know, I guess like sad that every year during New Year's, everyone's talking about their New Year's resolution. And I feel like telling all the Jewish people, like, it's the wrong time of year, right? Our New Year's resolutions are really supposed to happen this time of year. But the truth is the vast majority of people in this country, right, aren't Jewish, aren't celebrating the Jewish New Year. So you see in January, right, everyone's writing about their New Year's resolutions. And in fact, the biggest spike in gym membership happen in January. But, okay, so I saw this crazy statistic. By the second week of February, 80% of new gym members have stopped coming.
That's
Okay?
pretty intense.
That's pretty intense, right? Because the reality is that sometimes when we have goals, like we get very excited about them for the first like day, week, month, maybe.
That's
but
me.
Then, and I'm definitely like this. But then we kind of, we let them slip. Shifra was talking about staying up late at night. So I'm not a morning person either. And my kids are, and they like to get up at the crack of dawn. And I know that when I get up earlier than my kids, their day is completely different. And in the beginning of the school year, which was only like 2 weeks ago, I was resolved I was going to be up before my kids every day. I want to tell you, did not happen this morning, right? The resolve has weakened. It's really hard.
Okay, you have an excuse, Sarah. You do have a 5-month-old baby, so it doesn't really count for you.
It really counts because she's an excellent sleeper at night. So It's not an excuse. I'll be real with you. But thanks for giving me that pass. I think actually when you have goals, and I think before I get into how to make these goals, I think this is something that's really beautiful to do as a family or as a couple. One thing I try to do every single year is sit down and write some goals for this year. And I always share it with my husband because there's an accountability there. And I feel like it's special when we do things together. We even sometimes come up with things that we're both going to work on. And then I often have this conversation with my kids. I'm not necessarily going to share them everything on my list, but I might share them something because I want them to see that I'm working on myself. And I'll ask them, so is there anything you want to work on this year? I actually did it the night before we started school. We went around and each kid said, obviously except for the baby, each kid said their goal for this upcoming school year. And it blew me away how they were all able to articulate so beautifully a goal. And my kids are pretty little. They're 10, 9, and 5. But they all were able to really articulate. This is something you could do with even young children, is ask them their goals for this year. Because when you actually make a goal and set your intention, it makes it much more likely to happen. But how do you actually make sure that every single Rosh Hashana, you're not saying the same things over and over? So I'm going to share something that's actually used very much in the business world with goal setting. But I really think it applies also to our New Year's resolutions that we make. And they're called SMART goals, okay? SMART goals it's an acronym, and we're going to go through each letter. And it's a way of kind of a system of setting up goals that there's real follow through. So the first letter, S, is specific, okay? Very often when we have goals, we're very vague. I want to improve my marriage. I want to be a more positive person. I want to be a more patient mom, right? Things like that. But the problem with goals that are very kind of vague is that it's very hard to accomplish them because they're not specific, right? So you need to think to yourself, okay, I have a goal. I want to be a more patient mom. What does that look like? How does that feel, right? And what is the specific goal that I can do to attain that, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a goal that you want to write a book, okay? And you think it'll be very meaningful to write a certain book. So you're going to say, I want to write a book about my travels. I don't, but let's say I want to write a book about my travels and I want the first chapter done by the end of November, whatever it is. Like take a goal and make it very specific, because when it's very vague, it's just, it doesn't actually end up happening because it's not clearly defined. So that's the first letter. The second letter is measurable. So if you can't measure something, you can't really manage it. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so you're going by letters now?
S like SMART. So S is specific,
okay.
M is measurable, okay? So measurable means you have to have a way of measuring your goal, right? How am I going to measure my success? So for example, let's say your goal is to work on your relationship with your spouse, okay? So a way of measuring it might be, right, and this is something I unfortunately have not been very good about lately due to COVID and life, but is having a date night, right? I haven't done that. I don't remember what that is. But
I think we're all in this together.
Okay. Right?
Or at least I am.
Yes, back in the day when I can just call up a babysitter and life was simpler, right? That was a goal of mine, right? But having a thing, I want to have a better relationship with my husband is very vague, but specific might be, and measurable is, I am going to have a date night with my husband every, at least once a week, right? So it's measurable. I can know at the end of the month, right? Have I had 4 date nights? Or let's say I want to work on not gossiping, right? So I could say, I'm not going to gossip between the hours of 4 and 5 o'clock, right? I can measure. I can know, did I gossip between 4 and 5? I put a reminder on my phone, and did I gossip or not?
Sarah, can I just interject one thing
Sure.
here? I love that it's measurable, and what the example you gave, that I'm not going to gossip between 4 and 5 o'clock, you made it attainable. You didn't say a measuring, like something that would be like all day or between the hours of 9 to 4 o'clock, I'm not going to gossip, because that would be hard to really reach.
Right.
So I love that. Or once a week, you can go out on a date once a week, not 3 times a week, but once a week. So I like that as well.
Thank you.
That point.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one, which is actionable. Okay, A for actionable. So actionable means that it's better to have, a lot of times when we have goals, we use the word, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. But an actionable goal is something that has a more to be verb, right? Like, for example, as opposed to, I'm not going to waste time, right? So I might have that goal, right? Something like, I don't know about you, but I could sometimes fall in the abyss of like checking my Facebook feed, and then all of a sudden like 20 minutes went by and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just wasted 20 minutes like looking at weird videos of cats, So, right? So instead of not wasting, right? Most people, I assume everyone wastes some time in their life, right? But how about instead of not wasting time, right? Trying more productive ways to relax, right? How can I relax in a more productive way, right? I actually had this a few years ago where I was back when we were doing live programming, and I was driving from Dr. Phillips to Altamont Springs a few times a week. So I had a goal of trying to use my drive better. And I actually started, instead of just listening to music or like getting annoyed at the I-4 traffic, I started listening to podcasts. And my drive became so productive, right? It wasn't relaxing, but it was productive. So being actionable, right? Instead of not losing my temper, right? It could be, coming up with techniques to deal with my angry feelings, right? Instead of
are going to do instead of something you're going to hold back from.
Right. Make it actionable. Something that you're going to do as opposed to something you're not going to do, right? Kind of going, like being more, being very like proactive really about the change you want to make. It's really a lot in how, I actually, when I do this, I try to write this down. I think writing it down is really amazing. And actually, a lot of people think of Rosh Hashana as a time of introspection, but it actually starts in Elul, which already has begun, where we, a month beforehand, where we're supposed to spend this time in introspection. So at some point before Rosh Hashana, I actually try to write down goals. And these are just some tips on, like, how do we articulate these goals in a way that they can really stick? So the next one is, and Shifra kind of touched on this, the R is realistic, right? So you have to ask yourself a question, right? Is this goal worth the pain? Meaning, am I motivated enough to actually accomplish this, right? Let's say, go back to Shifra's example, right? Your goal is not to stay up late, or my goal might be to get up earlier. How motivated am I really to do that? Like, that might not be the goal for me right now, right? It may be the goal, it may not be the goal, right? You have to really dig deep and be able to articulate the benefit and how much it means to you. Or if you can't articulate it, then you probably should pick a goal that has a bigger payoff for you, right? It has to be realistic, not just in terms of the scope of what you want to do, but how motivated you are to do it, right? Which is why no one could pick the goals for you, because what you're motivated to do and when someone else is motivated to do are going to look very different. And that's why often we should pick things that are really small. When you hear stories about like big rabbis and the things that they said they want to do on Rosh Hashana and Kippur, they're usually like minute things. I remember hearing one time like a big rabbi had his students ask him, like, what did you decide to do this year? What's your big Kabbalah commitment that you're going to take on yourself? And he said, I'm going to say a certain specific blessing from the Siddur instead of saying it by heart, right? A small, minute little goal, right? But very often it's like the minute goals that actually stick. And another thing is, I would say, in terms of realistic, is sometimes it's best when we pick something that we're good at and upgrade it. Very often when we're picking our goals, we pick the things that we're the worst at, right? It's like very normal, right? I'm gonna pick something that I'm really lousy at because I really need to improve that. But what if you, like, this is a little bit of a paradigm shift, because I don't think people like typically do this, but what if we pick something that we're good at? Let's say I'm really good at, you know, okay, obviously not relevant to COVID, but let's say I'm really good at hosting guests, right? I'm a great host. I'm not necessarily the best host, but let's say that was my big, like a big strength. Thank you, Shifra, right? But I might say, how can I make this mitzvah even more meaningful, right? And that's a goal too, is sometimes even improving what we're good at. And very often those are the goals that we're more likely to be able to follow through with because we're good at it, and chances are we actually probably like it. Okay, and the last one from our SMART goals is time bound. I heard a phrase that the difference between dreams and a goal is a deadline. I'll say it one more time, right? The difference between dreams and a goal is a deadline. We all have a lot of dreams, right? I could tell you a whole bunch of them. I dream of having a perfectly organized garage. Yet if you go in my garage, it's not very organized. But if I tell myself, I have a goal of having a perfectly organized garage by the end of this month, because I have this plan.
Put it in your calendar.
Right, put it down in that phone, right? So for example, a time bound thing is really that we make a goal for our deadline, a deadline for our goal, because then it's it forces us to commit. And I would say that once you come up with these SMART goals, you should really find an accountability partner, whether it's your spouse or a friend, or even, you know, I've seen people, and this is not my style, but some people do this, they'll post on Facebook when they're trying to accomplish something, because then they have the whole world knows they're trying to accomplish it, and if that works for you, that's cool. Discuss it with your family. You know, I actually always tell my kids my parenting goals. I think it's really important that my kids know that I'm not there yet. I'm working on it in every aspect of life, including how I parent my kids. So I'll tell my kids, you know, guys, this year I'm working on, you know, when I get upset at you, not raising my voice or whatever it is. So that way, and guess what? Your kids will be your best accountability partners. They will remind you every time you mess up. Right, Shifra?
They are your biggest critics in the best way possible.
Right, but in this case, it could actually be a good thing.
You said you weren't going to scream at me, Mom. What are you doing?
Yes, I actually have one kid that that reminds me every time I raise my voice a teeny bit. He says, "I thought this is not a screaming house." So yes,
comes to bite us, right?
Totally. I'm going to end with one last idea in terms of having goals that really stick. And this is something I want to quote Vince Lombardi, who was, I believe, a football player, and he said, "The true test of character is how you act after being beaten. It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, as long as you keep picking yourself back up. Everyone fails, but the people who succeed in the end are the ones who are relentless and learn from getting knocked down." And I think the idea is that, like, I'll tell you an example. Like, I'm one of these people that have been on many diets in my life. And like, sometimes I'll be on a diet and let's say it's no carb, and then I'll have a carb. And then I'm just going to say, like, forget it. I had a carb. I might as well just eat anything I want, right? And then you go and slide back.
Eat the whole box of cookies. I just had one cookie, but now I'm going for the whole thing.
Totally, right? It's like this, like, I failed anyway. Might as well, like, go all the way. And I think one of the ways of keeping your goals is to recognize that failure is part of the process. You're going to fail. You're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that's totally normal. But don't let that say, like, okay, you know what, forget about it. This just isn't happening anymore, right? Okay, fine. I had a goal of waking up early every morning. I guess it's not for me. No, okay, so I didn't do it yesterday, but I can do it today. I think with that mindset, we can really, you know, make goals that are really attainable, and not let them, you know, like, realize, like, okay, even with all these things in mind, these SMART goals, we're gonna fail, and then we're gonna get back up again.
I love that. Sarah, before we go to the next question, could we just go over SMART one more time, just so we can try and process that in the memory?
So there's specific for
specific.
S, right? We want to be specific. Measurable.
Measurable. Okay.
Actionable.
Actionable.
Realistic.
Realistic. So don't try and not speak gossip for the whole day, basically.
Right. And time bound. Have a deadline for your goal.
A deadline. Okay. And then have an accountability partner as well.
Yes. I mean, that's not part of the SMART goals, but just, yeah, another.
Yes. But I loved also what you mentioned is that we should try and find goals that we're actually really great at too.
Yeah.
And just try and perfect them, because success breeds success.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we do take one or two goals, maybe not all our goals, but a few of them, if we focus on what we're good at and then we're able to succeed at those, we're going to be able to want to try and attempt more goals. So I love that idea that you gave specifically. Yeah.
Okay. Well, our last question here, because I know the hour is getting late. So the shofar. Let's talk about the shofar. So we blow this ram's horn, which always seems kind of like very medieval to me, right? You know, the guy, whoever is blowing the shofar, comes down and takes this like ram's horn, which I've never put my mouth on one, but I imagine it. I don't know. Does it smell? Your husband blows the shofar. Does it smell or taste funky? I don't know. But anyway, right? You take this ram's horn, and then like I remember as a kid learning about Rosh Hashana, it was almost like it was this like magical thing. We blow the shofar, and all is forgiven, and we're amazing, right? Like it's so like, what's the deal with blowing this ram's horn thing? It seems like a really big idea, but how does it help this whole process of introspection, of remembering why we were put on earth? Like, how does it tie into all this?
Okay, thank you for your question, Sarah, because I completely agree with your question. You know, like here we are, we have this day of introspection, and all of a sudden this shofar, this ram's horn. By the way, Sarah, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear me? If you can hear me, okay, great. So, you know, like what is this shofar doing here? What is the significance of it? We blow it every year. It's something that's in our tradition. But if you think about it, how crazy it looks from like somebody who would be looking at our traditions from the outside, somebody who has no clue about the Jewish traditions, and they're praying in synagogue, and all of a sudden they hear this, and like coming out of a ram's horn, you would think we were absolutely insane. Like, what is going on here? Like very medieval, you know, and I'd like to just touch upon this as briefly as we can, because what I learned about it was so meaningful to me, and it just completely shifted my whole perspective of what a shofar means. So in a literal sense, the shofar is there to wake us up and snap us out of our complacency and get us to repent. That's really what it does. So that's the first function. And the second function is that we are almost blowing a horn. We are coronating our king. So with in our Jewish history, we know we used the shofar when we coronated our human kings. It was a very significant part of the coronation process, and a massive ceremony, and they used the ram's horn to blow. So we are almost like making our king, our God, the king again on Rosh Hashana. So those are the two purposes: to wake us up out of our complacency and to bring our king back over in our hearts as the sovereign of who we are. So here's what I learned that I thought was so beautiful. Where did the ram first come into the Torah, right? Where was the first time we see this ram's horn? By Abraham, by Akedas Yitzchak. When, if, you know, just I could go over the story very briefly, God told Abraham, go sacrifice your son, Isaac, your son that you were waiting for 100 years. Go take him, sacrifice him to me. And Abraham didn't question it. He went, set up the altar. He took his son Isaac, and Isaac was a willing participant. They were both eager to do this mitzvah because God commanded them of this. And just before Abraham was about to slaughter Isaac. God says, stop. You passed the test. Don't do a single thing. Don't even make a scratch. And Abraham is like, really? But you told me, God, I want to do your will. Why are you making me stop now? And God says, stop. And Abraham says, no, I want to give you something. So God says, okay. And out of nowhere, through the bushes, comes a ram and says, you want to sacrifice something? You can sacrifice this ram. Thus being the first time that the ram and the ram's horn comes into significance in the Torah. So that seems like a crazy story just on surface value, right? Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son that he'd waited for, and that God asked him to do this. But if we look deeper, Abraham spent his entire life fighting idol worshipers. Now, if you think about it, the time of the idol worship, the specific type of idol worship in that day, required people to take their children and sacrifice them to their God. And Abraham, his mission statement, he was the one who sang over the rooftops, do not sacrifice your children. It is cruel. Come serve our God, our kind, loving God. Come. Don't sacrifice your children. Come serve our God, our benevolent, loving, kind God. This is what he said to everyone. He was famous for this. Can you imagine what a hypocrite Abraham would have looked like if he would have gone to sacrifice Isaac? This is what he stood for his whole life, and he was willing to give that up and look like a complete fool just because God was asking him to do this. And furthermore, God promised Abraham that he was going to have an entire nation stem from Isaac, that his descendants are going to be like the stars in the sky and the sand on the beach. How could God make descendants if he's going to slaughter Isaac right now? Didn't make any sense. And Abraham says, I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I'm going to do it anyway. This is what's going on behind the scenes. And God says, oh, I see what you did. I see what you sacrificed for me, Abraham, out of sheer love, even though intellect made no sense, even though it absolutely sounds barbaric and crazy. You were going to do it for me. That's it. And the sign of the shofar became our trump card. And from here on out, Abraham gave us a gift that is like no other. Because on the day of judgment, when we're standing before God and we're saying, God, give us a good year, even though we don't deserve it, even though we may have done wrong things, even though we may have not been the best version of ourselves, give us a good year. We hold up this ram's horn and we remind God, God, this is our symbol. This is our trump card. You're no longer dealing with us with logic anymore because we transcended logic the minute Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. And God comes off of that seat of judgment and he steps into the seat of mercy. And he gives us this loving, benevolent kindness that does not make sense because we may not have been earning everything that God gives us, all the blessing and bounty and love that God showers on us. We don't deserve it, but God's giving it to us. Why? Because of the symbol of this ram's horn and what it represents, that Abraham was willing to sacrifice everything for God. So wow. I know that's intense, but how beautiful is that?
That is really beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I know the hour is late. I just want to give one little quick synopsis of what else we can think about when the shofar blows. Is that when we listen to that sound, it almost sounds like archaic, not archaic, but very primal. It's not a symphony. It's not a glorious sound, but it's broken. A sound that goes beyond logic or reason, and the goal of it is to hit our soul. It's the language of the soul that words cannot really adequately do justice to. And when we hear that sound, that broken sound of almost like it's a disconnection from our God, and we want that connection so badly, that is what is happening when the shofar is blowing. We're almost like reconnecting to our soul. It's reawakening that sound within us. And we see very often that when we have monumental moments in life, like a wedding, or God forbid a tragedy, or things that are so powerful emotionally that words can't do it justice. I mean, we don't have words, but what do we have? We have our tears, and we have our weeping. That weeping is similar to the sound of the shofar, because that's the only way our soul can give expression. And then when that shofar sound blows, it's supposed to take our soul and reawaken it and reconnect us back to our Creator. So that's also another thing we can think about when the shofar blows.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
New idea.
Yes, and it's an amazing way to go into Rosh Hashana and think about the blowing of the shofar. And made me think about, how am I going to work out here in the shofar this year? Which, God willing, well, I think me and my husband will take shifts this year. Well, thank you.
We can also learn how to blow our own shofar, and we can see how to deal with that. Maybe we can have a little bit of
your husband could teach us?
Very possibly. Next session.
Okay, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'll ask him.
Okay, so I just want to thank you all so much for coming. I'm sorry so much for the tech issues in the beginning. I just wanted to let you know that, so this is, as I said in the beginning, we're going to do a 3-part session, and we might actually do a 4th one before Yom Kippur, but we're starting off with 3. So this time we focus very much on like the spiritual intentions of the day. Next week, we're going to try to focus on some very like practical things, the different like foods and the symbolic foods, and how to infuse meaning in them, how to have a meaningful Rosh Hashanah meal and experience, how to have a meaningful Rosh Hashanah if you're not even going to shul, tashlich, and then we're going to end off the Thursday before Rosh Hashanah, which is great timing. We're going to make some round challahs together. So I really hope you guys can all join us for those upcoming sessions. If there's any topics you want us to address next week, feel free to shoot Shifra and I an email. We'd love to do something that's meaningful for you all. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate Sarah's sentiments about how sorry we are for the technical difficulties in the beginning. So hopefully next week we'll have that all squared away.
Okay. Have a good one.
Have a great night, everybody.